Hello and welcome to today's Cambridge University Press ELT webinar. I'm Jenny Mutley-Collins and I'll be moderating today's session along with my colleagues Laura Sigsworth, Ellie Benstead, Tim Smith, Stuart Vinney and Jenny Turnbull. There's quite a large team of us here today. During the webinar, you'll be able to hear our speaker for today, Olha Madylus, and to see her slides. But you won't be able to see Olha herself. You won't need a microphone. If you want to ask a question, please use the questions tab, which you should be able to see in your control panel on the right of your screen. And the recording of today's webinar will be on our blog and on YouTube next week. We email you a copy of your attendance certificate the week after the webinar, and you'll also be able to download a copy at the end. So I'm very pleased to welcome Olha as this afternoon's presenter. Olha Madylus has been involved in English language teaching for over 30 years, living, teaching and training in Greece, Hong Kong and Venezuela. She is now a freelance materials writer, consultant and teacher trainer, and she trains teachers and trainers worldwide in countries as diverse as South Africa, India, Nigeria, Taiwan, Bosnia and Colombia. So now I'm going to hand over to you, Olha. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Hello, everybody. This is a very exciting afternoon for me because I can see how many people are joining this webinar from all over the world. So welcome to you all. And it's really fabulous to see so many teachers interested in developing different skills. So I hope there's something in here for everybody, even if you don't teach teens. I think there's lots here that you can take away if you're a primary teacher, and definitely if you teach older students too. So let's begin. I've been teaching students of all ages throughout my career, and I find it very interesting to see the differences between teaching younger children, under 10-year-olds, and teaching teens. It's absolutely delightful to spend time in a primary classroom, because one of the things that's so super about it, excuse me, is that students get very involved in activities, they get very focused, and to a certain extent we can give them time, we can allow them to develop things, to play, etc. Unfortunately, this really seems to change as soon as we get to secondary level, and suddenly us teachers, we get very time focused. We seem to worry a lot about, oh, you know, we've got to move on, we don't have enough time. I'm sure a lot of you have had that feeling. Have you? Like, let's see, you put your thoughts into the question box. Time seems to be so precious as we get to teach the older students, particularly when we're preparing students for examinations. And we feel that pressure to make sure that they're ready to take the exam. And all the fun things that I would do with primary students, I don't see that happening so much when I watch secondary classes or even university classes. So the fun goes, the games disappear. It's not that common to hear students singing songs. And something that is very much a core of the primary classroom, which is projects, also disappears in the senior classroom. So what I want to do in this session now is explore a few very important things that I feel I want to share with you. One of them is, what makes a project a project? What would you describe as a project? How is that different to a task? And why, in particular, projects are so suitable for teenage students? Why is this a good thing to do in our secondary classroom? not forgetting that students are preparing for exams. So what is it about projects that may help them with exam preparation? And I want to mention also life skills. How does doing projects help students develop absolutely crucial life skills? Also, I want to touch upon how we integrate projects into our classroom work. How do we plan to do them? And particularly at the moment, in this time of lockdown, or whatever you call it in your countries, here in the UK, we're calling it lockdown, which sounds very scary. But when so many students are having to do their learning online or at home, why would projects maybe suit these kind of students at this particular time? So that is what I hope to do in the next 40 minutes or so. So the first thing I want to talk about is how we perceive projects. I get to visit many, many classrooms around the world, and teachers quite often bring me to the notice board and say, look at this, isn't this a lovely project? Well, I don't know about you, do you think that's a project? Well, in my opinion, that is not a project. Just because it has some pictures on it, just because it's been pasted onto the wall or displayed, does not make that a project. To me, that is a task, it's a letter, and it has some pictures. So, what would you say are the characteristics of a project? I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to answer this, and I'll see if I can see your answers. So have a think. What, just any characteristics of projects? Oh, I'm seeing your answers now. Can you see it, Smither? Can you see the slides? Hope so. Woo! I don't need to do this at all. You've got lots of wonderful ideas here. Oh, wonderful. Absolutely. Well, all I can do really is bring your ideas together into my slides, because I think we're all on the same wavelength. Oops, my slides have frozen for the moment. Let me just see if I can get them back on. Sorry. Oh, here we go. Small technical hitch, don't worry, it's all fine. It's very warm here. So projects, one very important thing about projects is that there's a lot of student involvement in a project. A task is usually set by the teacher. It's very much, this is what you have to do, and you have to follow my instructions. So students take much more responsibility in doing projects. And they are topic-based, very much topic-based. So there are projects about sport, projects about food, projects about travel. And lots of people mention this, that there's always a certain element of research involved in projects. And it could be interviewing people, it could be online research, it could be giving out questionnaires, etc. But research is quite an important part of a project. And there is a final product. There's something tangible at the end of this. It's not just answering 10 questions and that's finished. There's something that you can share with other people. One thing that's very important for me is how projects integrate a number of different things. And as English language teachers, we do sometimes get tunnel vision focusing on grammar, vocabulary, language skills. But I think it's very important that students develop much more holistically, that they develop their skills hand in hand. So knowing about language and being able to do something with language is very important. So this is an experiential learning situation where students do something. They're absolutely involved in their learning by producing something. And language skills, when it comes to exams, language skills are artificially separated, in my opinion, that we have a paper on speaking, a paper on listening. Well, I don't know about you guys, but for me, listening and speaking go hand in hand. The most common way of listening and speaking is having a conversation. And while we separate those skills because it's much more convenient in exams, I think we must make sure that in the classroom we reintegrate those language skills. And I think it's very important that everybody, teachers and students, and other interested parties, understand that language is not just something, it's not just a series of facts. The present perfect is a tense used to describe blah, blah, blah. But it's actually a tool. We use language to do something. Teenagers, I say that there's a sigh there. I'm sorry if you heard my sigh. I've been teaching teenagers for my entire teaching career. I started as a state school teacher in England teaching teenagers. And the one thing that comes across so much is how much teenagers don't want to be told to do something. They want autonomy. They've been at school for many, many years. By the time they come to you at 15, they may have been at school for 11 years. And they are fighting for some degree of autonomy, some degree of independence. And I think this is a perfect time to allow them some autonomy, some independence, because they need to be independent learners. I don't know whether this has happened to any of you, but when I went to university, I was told off by my lecturers for not being autonomous enough. I went to a very strict all-girls school in London many years ago, and we were pretty much spoon-fed, and we didn't have any choices. So I think we've got to be able to give autonomy so students start to learn how to use it. So within projects, students do make choices. They decide a number of things, which we shall look at later. And they also take responsibility for their work, responsibility for their individual work, and responsibility for their group work. And very importantly, lots of you mentioned research, that they are starting to develop research and study skills on their own. And these are crucial for them. And what we need to do, I think, as teachers, is to gradually move away from the chalk and talk. Do you know that lovely old-fashioned expression where the teacher is at the front of the classroom and just giving out all the information to the students as if we're the font of all knowledge? So I think this is a good time for students to be involved in this. So, as I mentioned, the learning to learn is very important, that they're building up their skills. Many of our teenage students will go on to further education, and it may not be formal further education, but they will continue learning. If they go and start a new job straight away, they still have to learn on the job. But at university, one of the very important things is when you are studying, when you're doing research, particularly nowadays, is finding sources of information that are valid. This is something that is so topical these days, differentiating fact from opinion. How do you know that what you're reading online is actually true and not just some crazy person coming up with some very strange ideas? How do you extract key points from a text and not just copy whole chunks? How do you take notes? How do you do that? How do you rephrase something in your own words? And this is, if we look at a lot of these, extracting key points, rephrasing, they are also exam skills. And a very important thing here, avoiding plagiarism, of actually just copying other people's work. I found this as a teacher at university level. here in the UK, I was working with many students from all around the world, and many of them did not understand the problem with plagiarism. They seemed to think cutting and pasting was absolutely fine, even though it involved none of their own language skills or knowledge skills. And of course, having their own opinions, being able to express what they believe based on what they've read, based on what they've researched. What I get excited about, and my students get excited about too, very often as part of the project, is how do they present the information? Many students begin their projects by thinking about, we want to make something, we want to do something, and this is a very motivating thing. Products can be very, very different, and I'm just going to give you a list of a variety of different things that you can have as part of the product. You may not initially give them all these choices, but there are lots of things available. And I think nowadays with technology, there are lots of ways of capturing things that we didn't have before. Many students have smartphones, and they can actually video a documentary on their smartphone if that's what they want as their final product. And creating things like websites, blogs, etc. All these things are now possible for students to do. And they're not only developing their language skills, they'll also be developing their digital literacy skills at the same time, which is very exciting. So this is what I was saying, that this is not a task, but because they're going to create something that's not just an answer to a question. As you can see, there's a lot more range for choice. There's a lot more range for creativity. Now, here's a question for you. When you're going to set up a project with your students, what would you say are the stages of this? What would you put down as the stages of doing a project? I'll give you a minute or so to think about that and to pop up your ideas. I think there's no wrong answer here, but I think it's always useful to consider, what do you want to get out of it, and how do you want to make sure that a project is successful? So I've got a 6-part process that I introduce to students, but you don't have to have 6 parts. You can have 3, you can have 7, but I think it's important to see a progression of the stages and to think about how this is helpful for students, rather than just, we're going to do a project, go. So the first part of doing any project is the planning, and very often projects are done in groups, and those are my favorite projects, but they could be done independently. But you need a plan. You need to think, what do I want to do? What do I want to achieve? What information do I need? How am I going to get it? So a plan before you start is crucial. Then you have to go and get your information. Where are you going to find the information? Are you going to ask people, do questionnaires? Are you going to look online? Are you going to look in books? Where are you going to get your information? Then there's that really important part. I think this is an important part that many students don't realise that they should be doing, is taking notes, is collating what they find, putting it together in note form first. And as I said earlier, I think this is a very important skill. Then they create the project. So they're moving up to create the project. Obviously, you can have lots of mini stages in between to make it more step by step. Once they've created their project, they present their project. So that could be showing a video, doing a drama presentation, singing a song, showing a poster. And then the final part is really super, super important for me, that we don't stop at the presentation, that the evaluation stage is very important. And this is not, to me, this is not something that needs to be critical. in terms of that was a good project, that was not a good project. I would say it's much more about evaluating the process as than the product. So talking about how did you go about this? How did you plan? Was your planning effective? Where did things go wrong? How could you make them better next time? So a lot of self-evaluation. You could have peer evaluation as well. The rest of the class could give feedback. And when I ask for other students to give feedback, I quite often say, do you know the two stars and a wish way of doing things? Some people call it the criticism sandwich, but I prefer to call it 2 stars and a wish. So say 2 things you liked about it, and say 1 thing you wish was there or you wish was different. So you are asking people to do that. And when we evaluate the project, not just to say, oh, it was very nicely presented, but to evaluate also the other stages. How did the students work together? Did you see them cooperating? Did you see them taking language risks? Did you see them using language creatively? So I think this whole thing is a nice framework to help us to make sure that the project is not just about the product at the end. Now, I mentioned that I'm a great believer that projects are very useful for exams. And again, you may find that a bit strange that projects don't seem to be very exam focused, that nothing about exams seems to show that you need the ability to do a project. But if we go back to what I was saying at the beginning about making language much more a tool to get things done, when you do a project, you look at language very much meaningfully. What is the meaning of this language? What am I doing with this language? So when we do projects, the language that students are developing, the grammar, the vocabulary, the functional language, the everyday language, the intonation, I can go on and on and on in that list, but all the language that they're developing in their English language classrooms can be practiced contextually, and the context is very important. So they're not just doing activities, exercises on particular bits of grammar or vocabulary, they're actually using that language to get something done. And as they do that, it really helps them internalize the language. And by internalize, I mean to really understand it, but also to help remember it, to make it memorable. And it's much more personalized. So the practice that you get with language is not something the teacher tells you to do for practice, but you practice it in your own way. So if you are a very musical person and you make a song about, I don't know, the environment, about how we should be helping the environment, and you're using the language that you've learned in your unit, you are personalizing, so it's very meaningful to you. And that, again, is very, very motivating for many students. We're not all the same. Some of us would much rather be musically challenged in our lessons or, you know, intellectually challenged. So if we go back to exams, I'm sure lots of you do Cambridge exams, but if you don't, you probably do other exams that are similar, or you would do school exams with your students. I don't think those poor teenagers can escape from examinations. But if we break down what is in exams, if we look at the basics, so in a Cambridge exam, this would be your format for your different parts of the exam, that what you need is these kind of chunks of language practice. So your vocabulary, your lexical phrases, your grammar. So all these things need to be practiced. So through doing project work, you can practice all this lovely language, and it will help you to really understand that language in context. So there's your reading and your listening, but also to produce it. So there's your writing and your speaking as well. And hopefully to remember those chunks of language, how the language fits together, and that would be your use of English. So I'm a great believer that these things really feed in, that projects feed in to good exam preparation. I said I was going to mention life skills as well. And I don't know if you've come across the Cambridge life skills, and I'll show you some about that in a minute. But life skills now is something that many of us are focusing on, that we want to help students not just get their English up to a certain level in order to pass an exam, but we want them to develop all the different skills that they need to develop to be successful in their futures. And here we have, as I promised I'd show you, so this is the Cambridge Framework for Life Competencies. So a life competency is synonymous to a life skill. And if you look across the top, those are the 6 core life skills. We've already touched upon these talking about projects. So we've talked about creative thinking. You've mentioned creative thinking more than me. Critical thinking, making choices, problem solving, learning to learn. So developing those skills that we need for the future that I mentioned. Obviously communication, collaboration, all these things are super important. I want to actually stop and focus on the collaboration, but actually I'm going to just drop down and look at those other things here, like emotional development. Dealing with your emotions when you're doing a project is very important, because I remember doing projects at school and, you know, people getting angry, some girls getting upset, because working in groups is very difficult. So I think a project is a great place to develop your emotional intelligence. And obviously digital literacy is very important, developing those computer skills to be able to do research and also to display what you found. Discipline knowledge relates to the knowledge of your subject. So here we're talking about English. But let's look at collaboration, because I think when we do projects, as I said, I generally, in my experience, I've done project work with groups, and I really like doing project work with groups because I think that's where it's the most valuable, but not exclusively. But collaboration, when you look at the skills, the life competencies that are linked to collaboration, it becomes very interesting. And you can see, if you've ever tried doing projects with your students, how much this is important for them to think about and to develop. So they need to take responsibility for their own contribution. They need to be reliable. They can't just say, I'm going to go and find this information and not find it. They need to work together, to be constructive in their criticisms, to be respectful of other ideas. You can't just say that's stupid. That's not acceptable. They have to share the tasks in a project. They have to work towards a resolution. They have to make sure that they reach the end of that and actually have a product. And this is a very interesting thing. I want to just focus a little bit on this, managing the sharing of tasks. Is the things that really are important when you're doing a project is making sure that they're following their plan, telling each other when things are going wrong. Not just saying we should do this, but being able to articulate their ideas. That's very important. And I think also this idea of taking responsibility for completing your tasks. When we work in groups, I think it's really fascinating that some people that have a very small task don't think it's important. But actually, every single element of a group task is important, because it's like a chain, you know, the weakest link. We don't want to allow a task to collapse, the project to collapse, because one person has not done something. Okay, I just thought I'd bring in a bit of a focus on critical thinking, because some of you mentioned that, and that is absolutely vital that we focus on this in our classrooms with teens. Most of the time, in my experience, where teenagers get bored, they get fed up, they get difficult, is because they're not pushing themselves, they're not being challenged. And critical thinking is really important. Teenagers are hungry to think, they need to be able to try out, to exercise that brain of theirs. So if you look at this, I really like this as a circle, this diagram, that what we're doing is we're moving from the left-hand side, from remembering and understanding language, to applying the language, to analysing it, evaluating, and going all the way to creativity when we're doing a project. And I think that's a really nice way to look at it, that projects, you can see there's so much application and analysis, because I've even heard students discussing quite passionately, what words they should use in a drama they're doing, or the poster they're preparing. They get very, very, very focused and very analytical about that. Now, some of you may teach students who are quite a low level, who may be A1 or A2. And that's not a bad thing, that's just the reality, that we have lots and lots of different levels. And some of you may teach younger teens who may not seem very mature. So you may be thinking, oh, well, I can't possibly do projects with them because A, they don't have enough English, or B, they're just going to be silly. If I give them complete autonomy, there's going to be disaster. Well, I don't think we should give them complete autonomy straight away. I think that things are always, life is all about it depends. So I call this the project cline. So we are looking at what we've got at the moment in many classrooms is a very teacher-led, teacher-focused approach. And we're saying we want to move away from this. So we want to move away to a more student-centered, led and controlled approach. But we're not going to just jump from one to the other, and we're not going to have that all the time anyway. What we have, I think it's very important to allow students to get involved in tasks that have elements of projects, so they can develop these skills slowly, surely, one at a time. They can't develop everything suddenly. So what we're doing is we're building their skills to be able to make choices, to be able to use language effectively. And we're also developing their language skills. So we're starting at lower levels, and slowly but surely their language is getting more complex and more effective. So what I want to show you now is just a little bunch of activities. I don't think bunch is a good word, actually, sorry. A selection of activities that show this, how we can do this with project work. So when you look at this, you say, well, hold on, it's not completely autonomous. That's why we're building up those skills. So this is from a book, Compact, which is for A2 students. So we know that A2 students probably need a lot of help. They need scaffolding, they need support to be able to produce a project on the project side and on the language side. So these kind of activities are given to the students so that they plan together, they think about what they're going to do, they start developing the language. So you can see at the bottom, I love the questions there, because they're really leading the students to make their own choices, but in a very directed way. So what's the topic of your project? How will you present the information, etc. So this is where the support and the scaffolding is. And then they continue, and it's quite a long series of activities they do, because they have to build the language skills at the same time. So it's a very nice way of doing it when you start at A1, A2 levels. Another activity here is at level 1, which is around A1, A2 as well, is designing a food truck. So again, it's a step-by-step activity, which and also they have ways of evaluating this too, that evaluating their language and ability. Project has some very nice projects. Oh, sorry, Prepare has some nice, oh dear, I'm talking rubbish here. Sorry, Prepare has nice projects. And what these projects are kind of mini independent pieces of work the students do, which are linked to the units. But they actually develop lots and lots of the sub-skills of projects. So here we go, note taking, which is very important. And I really think we should be doing a lot more note taking in class with students. Even making lists would be helpful. There's a personalisation of things. You can decorate things the way you want them. So if you have a project about your favourite personality, celebrity, bring in all these things that's very, you choose the person, you choose the pictures. And that's a really nice thing for students to do. And that's that creativity aspect of it too. And also the communication. You notice that both of these say present to the class. And this is a fantastic way to practice speaking, to develop your confidence in speaking. So this is a very important thing to do. And I think presentations are very useful. I do them from A1 upwards, lots of support, lots of help, keep them short, but get used to speaking English to those people. So once you get to do speaking in exams at a higher level, it's a piece of cake. Here in Open World, there are similar kind of tasks, and here we focus more on those life skills, but also they're developing life skills through those project type tasks and activities. So here we go. In this one, there is the research involved. With a partner, go online and research one national park in the UK. So you have to use your computer, you have to use your ability to find information, because you're going to go then and give a presentation about this to the rest of your class. So here we see that there is a lot of scope for personalisation, for making your own choices. Again, here's an activity where you find out about tourist attractions in a town or city, and then you create a poster to present to your class. So again, research and creating a product. So you can see how these are linked to everything I've been saying before, but it's a little bit more controlled, a little bit more manageable, should I say, in a classroom. And more research. Research is such a strong strand here. And again, sharing ideas, talking in groups, getting a discussion going. So there's lots of opportunities to develop these skills that you will need in the future that also add so much value to the classroom. Classrooms where this is taking place will be more dynamic, be more interesting, and students will be able to actually be actively involved in their learning. So how do you integrate projects in your classroom? Because it may seem, well, you can do it the way we've seen those course books do it. So that's already planned out for you. But what you could do also is link it to a topic in the course book or a topic that the students are interested in. Sometimes students say, well, the topics in the course book are okay, but we really like music. We love, pop music. We like the movies. We like to go to films. So why not then allow them to explore a topic that they like through a project? I think end of year is a great time, or end of term is a great time to do projects, to consolidate language, and to also just kind of change the tack, change the pace. Students working very, very hard, and you get to the end of an academic year or a term and everyone's quite exhausted. So doing something completely different, like a project, can add energy into that time when quite often there's a slump. I would definitely say, don't just say, you're going to do a project and shut the door and run away. No, I think that teachers have a huge role as guides, as monitors, making sure, keeping an eye on what's going on, gently pushing some students to be more actively involved, and also helping to set limits on what they do. So I think monitoring students is really important, and sometimes you may need to offer some help. This could be linguistic, or it could be practical. They might need something. You might be able, that there's some material in a cupboard somewhere in the school that they could use. So, just some practical help sometimes is useful. But also, very, very importantly, keeping them on time. That's why a plan is very good, because you don't want projects just to go on and on, or for students to run out of time and never actually finish the project. That's tragic. The students get so disappointed, and teachers get very frustrated, and then they don't do projects again. So let me face something that's going on at the moment that's affecting every single one of us, and this is this terrible situation of the virus, and how we are doing things very differently. Here I am speaking to almost 2,000 of you from my own home, and I never thought that I would do this. But for teenagers, I'm very concerned about teenagers, because teenagers don't always show their emotions. If you are a parent of teenagers, quite often if you say to them, so how are you? They go, I'm fine, thanks. I'm okay. And there's very little maneuverability between fine and okay. But actually, I think that for all of us, this is a very stressful, a very scary time. And I think for students, it's not just what's happening in the outside world that's scary, but their education is being disrupted. They're not seeing their friends, that there are so many things happening that are affecting them, and they can be upset and traumatized by this. So I think there is an opportunity here. So in this present situation, students may lack motivation. I know, you tell me of how motivated your students are at the moment. They may be suffering from mental health issues, and I think we have to accept this, that it's very traumatizing, all this, and it's very scary. So I think we have to accept that it's not an easy time. They may just think, oh, this is ridiculous. Why are we doing these books? Why are we having to do them online? And they also may find that, trying to keep to lessons at particular times is very difficult, because they might, well, I think there's lots of reasons for this. I can't imagine families where both parents are working from home and there are 3 children maybe at home and everybody has their own computer. That seems very luxurious to me. So it's a very challenging thing to do online learning when the teacher wants you to be available. And of course, I think sometimes we need to distract ourselves. I know I'm watching a lot of Netflix and reading a lot of detective stories at the moment, which is quite bizarre. But I need distraction, and I think we all need distraction. So projects could be a good solution for them. I think they can be motivating because students can go ahead and just pursue their own interests, which is very calming and very kind of, it's like a comfort blanket to say, okay, I am just going to look at, I'm just trying to think of a famous musician or pop star. I'm going to look at Bruno Mars. I'm going to look at George Clooney. I'm just going to do my research on something that makes me happy. And they can use these other skills of theirs, their artistic skills, their musical skills, their creative skills. And they can be doing this at the same time as actually doing useful English language work, because they're going to be producing a project in that language. So the focus isn't so much on the language, no, on the surface, but we are getting them to do this. And they can get on with it without feeling criticized, or without having to be sort of people telling them what to do, what not to do. And what I also think is very important, sorry, is that they can work with other students if they want to, that they can get together online with their pals. And I'm just going to say that we have to stop believing that we control everything as teachers. We can let them get on with stuff. I think, especially at this time, we need to be kind to ourselves and just say, you know, if they're doing something in English and it's useful and they're recycling language and they're being creative, that's great. We cannot control everything. So please, please, teachers, be kind to yourselves. So just to finish off, some top tips for setting up projects. Make them smart. Introduce your students to this acronym. I think you probably know the SMART acronym. Make sure that they plan their projects, so they're very specific. So they don't just say, we're going to do a drama, but we're going to do a drama that lasts 4 minutes, that is going to be videoed, that is going to be blah, 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 that they know exactly what they're going to do. So it's measurable. They know when they've done it, not just a sort of ongoing long thing. We're going to create a soap opera about this. Well, soap operas can go on forever. Is it achievable? Is it something that you can do? When they say we're going to interview 20 pop stars around the world, is that really achievable? Is it something real that they're doing, something actually tangible? And very, very importantly, it's got to be time bound. They've got to be able to manage their time and keep to the time. And that is a really useful skill for all of us, I think. My other top tip is before we start projects with my students, we always discuss what's fair, because that's the big thing. Oh, it's not fair. I've done more than he's done. You know, I've done the writing, she's taken the photographs. So talk about this, get people to understand the values of everybody's contributions. And some students will have, you know, a higher level of English than others. That's just what happens in classrooms. And also discuss how you're going to do this, the problems they might have, let them speak about them, but also talk about at the end, and that's part of the evaluation, is what they learned, what was successful. Oh my goodness, I never knew that Maria was such a fantastic artist. Wow, we discovered that Peter can write music, that he could be a pop star. Wow, this is a great time for celebration. So let me just conclude. I think projects are great for mixed ability learning because everybody can bring something of their own to it. Great for different learning styles, the musical, the mathematical, the creative. We can have lots of cross-curricular links in projects. They can link it to history, to science, to things that they really find exciting. There's a lot of opportunity when they're working in groups for peer teaching, and as I said, a lot of opportunity for self-evaluation, for actually thinking about your own strengths and how you might work on your weaknesses. I would say in conclusion, I think that projects really do allow students to bring together, to synthesize what they know about language and how they can use language. So I think that's a very important thing. And just finally, here is my blog address. If you're interested, on my blog I have lots of ideas for teaching teenagers as well as teaching primary school students. And with the teenagers' ideas, you can also use them at university level. So that's quite a nice thing to do. So thank you very much. I hope that that was interesting, and I'm going to hand over now to Jenny. Thank you.
Hello again, everyone, and many thanks, Olha, for such an interesting session. Attendees, you will now be able to download your attendance certificate from the handouts tab on the right of your screen. We will also send you this certificate by email in the next few days, just in case you have any problems downloading. Now, does anyone have any questions? Please type your questions in the questions box. This is the box we've been using all along, and Olha will answer as many as possible as we've got time for in a moment. And while you're thinking about that and writing your questions, let's just give you a little bit of information about some of the materials and resources that we have available at the moment to support teachers of teens. I'm just going to move on the slides ever so slightly. Many of the examples are ones which Olha has used are taken from these courses. So first of all, this is, oops, the slide has moved of its own accord. Just go back. This is Prepare Second Edition. It's a 7-level course which combines exam preparation with teen appeal topics and general English. There are 2 books per exam level. Levels 2 to 3 prepare for A2 Key for School, 4 to 5 prepare for B1 Preliminary for Schools, and levels 6 and 7 prepare students for B2 First for Schools. And there is a comprehensive exam journey throughout. Now, in addition, Prepare includes culture sections every 2 units. Sorry, the slides are a little bit out of sync. And these encourage collaboration in class, or they can be used as homework. There are notes and extension ideas in the teacher's book. And then we also have Compact. Again, you saw some examples from this. It's a course which provides fast, focused exam preparation. Each level contains 50 to 60 hours of work, and it's designed to teach exam skills and maximize performance in students who are already at the right language level. There are now 20 class projects to accompany A2 Key for Schools. My slides are moving again. A2 Key for Schools and B1 Preliminary for Schools. Each project accompanies a topic from the book. There are handouts and teachers' notes to accompany each project, and they can be used both for teaching now, online, or when students are back in class. And now I'm going to pass over to Laura to tell you a little bit about another course, Own It. Are you there, Laura?
Hi, everybody. So, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me? So you'll have also seen some examples from Own It, which is a 4-level course for teenagers, British English course, which combines collaborative project work with learner training, and it's all about helping students develop vital life skills alongside their language skills. And in the next slide, please.
Okay, just trying to move that on. They're a little bit temperamental. Now it's gone too far.
Oh, that's okay. Oh,
There
here
we
we
are.
go. So Own It includes a CLIL or a culture project for every unit, and they're also accompanied by a project book, which has step-by-step guides and practical tips and lots of ideas for doing projects in class, making project work easy, because project work can often feel like a bit of a chore to organise. There's also a brand new digital collaboration space for students to work together on projects outside of class, and here teachers can group students, they can assign projects, and they can assess work that students have shared with the class. So if you want more information on Own It, you can go to cambridge.org/ownit. That's cambridge.org/ownit. That's all from me.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. I hope you've all found that information useful. Now let's take a look and see if we've got any questions for Olha. Olha, have you managed to have a look at the question
I've picked out a
box?
few, definitely. So I'll
Okay.
try to answer the ones I've picked out. Somebody wanted a clarification about the idea of language as a tool. What I mean by this is that very often, probably the traditional language teaching is learning language as a list of information. So I am, you are, we are, they are. But what do you do with that? So what we don't, language is not a list of information. Language is something we use all the time. We use language to apologize. We use language to persuade. So in that way, it's a tool. It gets things done. If I'm thirsty, I would say to you, please, can you give me a glass of water? Language, therefore, becomes a tool to satisfy my needs and to communicate with you. So I think it's very important as teachers that we see the communicative value, the functional value of language that we need to make sure our students understand. So a number of people asking about using projects with primary. Well, there's lots of lovely ideas for projects with primary students. And yes, of course you can use them. I mean, just one idea I have that I've done with my primary students is to get them to build a street of shops from old boxes and stuff. And then they go shopping around these streets. So it's got the creativity part of it, the communication part of it, but there are lots of good examples in many of the primary course books that come from Cambridge. Somebody also was asking how to prepare students for Cambridge exams. Well, if you look at these books, there's lots of fantastic preparation for Cambridge exams in these books. And you can go to the brochures online. If you go to the Cambridge University Press website, you can find lots of very good books there. Somebody asked about evaluation. And as I did mention evaluation, and what I would say is don't just give them like, oh, 6 out of 10 for your project. That was okay. I think it's very difficult to compare projects to say this one is better than the other because they are so different. I think we need to be evaluating the processes. What did the students learn from that? Sorry, I get very emotional about this because I just don't think grades are very effective here. It's not about giving them a grade, saying that was an A, that was a B. What are they actually learning? It's very much a journey, the project. And what did you learn on that journey? What could you do better again? How could you apply it in real life? And I think some people have also mentioned how do you get them to use English while they're doing that project. And I would just say as they develop their English, you introduce lots of useful language to them, like making suggestions, giving opinions. So they're actually incorporating that language. But as I said, it's very much a cline. You're working towards all these things. You can't do it all at the same time. You can't just suddenly do that. And I think we have to try and be very sensitive to what does motivate our students. And I think we have to try things out. We try it out, and we have to take evaluation on the chin as well. If students don't enjoy certain things, we have to find out why. How can we help them to enjoy them more? But I think it's, we're all on a journey, so we're just trying to find different ways of doing things. But definitely, I think projects, I've been teaching for a very long time. It's actually 40 years. And I've done projects with primary, secondary, university students. And I think, they're not always wonderfully successful, but students have so much that they can learn from doing projects. And like I say, the life skills that they develop as well are so important and so valuable for their future lives. And I think we have to have some fun with them as well. So I don't know if we've got time for any more questions. I make it 4 o'clock.
Yeah, I think that may be all we've got time for today. But thank you so much, Olha. That's been really interesting and really useful content. And it's been great to see so many of you all attending the webinar today. Thank you all for coming. Don't forget to check our events page for details of upcoming events and webinars. The recording of today's webinar should be live on our blog and YouTube channel within the next few days. So do look out for that if you missed any of it. Thank you all for attending. Thank you again, Olha. It's been really
You're very welcome.
enjoyable. And we hope to see you all again soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.